Hey, John, how are you today?
Doing great, Ralph. Good to go. It's been a good, really enjoyed our last few sessions, talking about these attributes and looking forward to doing it again today.
Yeah, me too. Today we're talking about commitment. Last session we talked about conflict. Thought we had a really great discussion around all the things related to having positive conflict and what that can mean for an organization. So I'm excited to talk about our next one, and that's commitment. And we got our snazzy new graphic that we rolled out this last video, so we're excited about that. Hey, one of the great things about the Lencioni model and the five dysfunctions of a team pyramid is I love the way that it builds on itself, right? Because we started talking about, even before we got to the pyramid, we started talking about smart teams and healthy teams and the importance of a healthy team and what that means. And then we talked about trust and how to get that. We gave everybody some exercises and some really good examples. And then last, as I said, we talked about conflict. And today now is sort of the culmination of those two things of getting to commitment. And a lot of times in organizations, and I imagine this happens in sport too, is that people want to just get to commitment. I need commitment from my people. I need my people to commit. And without trust and conflict, it's really difficult to get to really good commitment. And that's going to be the backbone of what we talk about today.
And I agree. I think that, one of the great things about these attributes is they truly build on each other. And really, like you just noted, you can't really just take a sliver and say, we're going to do this. It really, all of this stuff is so foundational to any successful team, certainly organization. I think that, kind of looking at it as these building blocks, I think is a great approach to take. But I think, commitment is certainly founded on the idea of trust and the idea of being able to have healthy conflict, as we discussed. And I think that kind of leads you right into having a great committed group.
Yeah. All right, why don't you go ahead and get started on this one?
Yeah, well, first of all, I know, the scoreboard here, a lot of times in sports, we're looking at the final outcomes pretty clear on the scoreboard at the end. And, but I think that one of the things I really try to talk to, my teams about is the idea that the final score really is a culmination of what happens leading up to it. And I often, will tell our team that, a couple things I'll tell them. One is, if it was easy to be the winning team, then everybody'd win, but it's not. And it requires a lot of things out of your team. And a huge part of that is commitment, and really being committed to going the extra mile, buying into not only the mission or the game itself, but also buying into one another in a way that, puts you in a position to sacrifice, makes you willing to, really be all in. When I went to Silverton in 2010, I'd been in California as a coach and teacher, and we moved to Silverton, and their program, quite honestly, hadn't been struggling before I got there, and was actually in last place, and it had been. And so they didn't have a real extensive summer training program. And so, the first, I came up with something, and I had a schedule, and I alerted the parents. And one of the parents said to me, well, gosh, is this summer workout? Is this mandatory? And I'm like, well, it's mandatory if we want to be any good, So I think the idea is that, commitment level, a high degree of commitment and buy-in is crucial to, having the scoreboard look like it does in this case, with a victory.
Yeah. Well, these poor kids on the scoreboard, it's 35-0 in the first quarter.
So, I didn't notice that.
Yeah. I felt bad for the visitors there, but yeah, I think that's an important thing to really underscore is, does your team know what they're committing to? And I think in business it's awesome in sports because there's one board that everybody's looking at. But in business it's a little bit trickier. And I think for leaders to really work with their team on understanding what our scoreboard number is, whether that's, that may be revenue for some, that may be a sales number, that may be net income, it could be multiple things, but the leadership, the executive leadership team really honing in on what that is. So everybody's focused on that one thing. And right in the business environment, right, becomes individual stats or sort of departmental numbers. right? My department did great. Or I can blame it. Well, the salespeople they didn't follow through with their work. So therefore it's not my fault in operations, right? So it's easy to start blaming when we're not really focused on what that one thing is. So
For
I think
sure.
that's
I'm
kind of
sorry.
what we're talking about here in business. Yeah.
No, I was going to say for sure. And I think it also, again, reconnects what we talked about last time is, you know, when people have that buy-in, when they're part of the process, which isn't always easy, right? It's easier, faster if you just make all the decisions yourself. But if people can feel like they have a voice in the process and you've had these discussions, it really enhances, I think, the degree to which people will be committed to what your goals are.
Awesome segue to this, because we were talking about building on trust, and without trust you're not going to have conflict, right? People are not going to want to discuss things, and without conflict you're not going to get commitment. And what that looks like is, it looks like that people are not having meaningful discussions. People won't share their opinions. People are defeated. They just sort of are putting in time. They're indifferent. Maybe they're fearful to speak out. And there's no exchange of ideas, and you're just not getting any energy from people. And we talked last time about artificial harmony, and how dangerous it is. And for me, I had a situation in a work position I had where it was very clear the leader did not want other people's opinions. And we learned that very quickly, that it was about executing what that person wanted to do. And it was really, really difficult. And I couldn't stay long because I just couldn't be in an environment where I couldn't have a say of what was going on. So yeah, it's something that I think is really important to understand, that if you are not letting people participate, you're not going to get their commitment.
And I would completely concur, and I'd even take it a step further in that the conversations and the discussions that you have, they have to be genuine, and they have to be purposeful, and they have to be sincere, because people can very easily sniff out, like you're kind of describing with this boss, that hey, I'm going to email you a survey monkey to get us your input on this ideas, and then you send in the results like, hey, everybody, thanks for your input, but I think that's going to do more harm than good. I think when trying to create, a committed group, you really have to make the people feel empowered, heard. And again, it kind of drops back even to what we talked about in previous sessions with trust.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they know you're listening because
Yeah.
you've demonstrated to them that you're listening. You have heard something they've said before. You're made a personal connection with them. And I think by kind of going from this artificial place to a real place, I think is a huge, huge thing. And, I heard a coach speak years ago. He had a very big influence on me back in the early 90s, was how his son was a high schooler, and was like, the coach said, like, kind of a very average to mediocre player, but how, like, if the coach ever said anything to him, gave him coaching, said, hey, nice throw yesterday, like, how the kid was like, so grateful for that. And this coach's point was that his goal every day was to have a meaningful interaction with every guy on his team. Now, is that realistic in a company or a large group? Maybe not. But again, having these discussions and getting people committed, I think a lot of it comes down to these genuine, sincere discussions that take you far beyond this artificial harmony.
Yeah. And I think, we talked about vulnerability in the last session, and I think that that's part of it too, right? Is the leader has to acknowledge, and I think what you're talking about is that they don't necessarily have the right answer. They don't have the answer. And I know early in my career, I didn't want to take the time to get other opinions because I felt like I knew I had the answer. I knew what I wanted to do. I didn't need it. Through maturation and mistakes and time, I understood that there are so many more great ideas out there beyond what I'm capable of. And it just takes a minute to understand that, to be able to take the time to sincerely ask, like you're talking about.
And I think that, this really can be seen, on coaching staffs. I mean, I've been very fortunate to be on some great cohesive groups, but, I see other coaches, or I sometimes will talk to other coaches where things are way more territorial, the offense versus the defense versus this versus that. And I think that, that can really, really pull you down. And I think that, getting people on the same page, but I also think, like, kind of like you alluded to, like, when you were younger, and I think it's kind of all of us, kind of want to feel like we have, it's not a natural thing to want to allow other people to give input, and it might feel funny at first, but I think the more people know they're heard, like on my coaching staffs, every Sunday morning when we would meet, every phase of the practice and the game plan, I'd say, does anybody have an idea? And I'd write it on the board, and and it would be like, are we going to use all of them? Probably not, but they're all in play for what's happening next week. And they all knew they were heard. It wasn't just cursory, email me an idea that goes into the junk file. It was very, very clear to them that it was being considered.
Yeah. John, curious, did you see a difference in coaching colleagues of guys that played football and guys who didn't, and maybe how they approach things differently? Was there a difference, or could you not draw that line?
You're talking about with parent, if their sons were on my team?
No, if they played themselves.
Yeah, I found that almost the better someone was at this sport, and like maybe they'd coached different levels above what we were, I found that they were more secure in their own understanding. They were actually, sometimes it's someone that's doesn't have the experience that feels maybe a little bit insecure, that's kind of more defensive. But I found that a lot of times when you have a real talented person and you add them to the group, like they can be a huge, huge asset. And like I said, I mean, I don't know if it was just me or luck or whatever, but I found that a lot of times we would bring people on board, and that were, a couple of them in California were ex-NFL players, and they were like awesome. They had a great wealth of information, but they weren't feeling the need to like slam it home every time. They would pick their spots. But I think that I never thought of that, but that was really the case with me.
So I think that's awesome. That's a great lesson for mature leaders, right, that are on this side of the managerial place or the coaching spot. And then I guess for young leaders, I think maybe the lesson is allowing yourself to be vulnerable, even if you're not 100% secure, right? Because you will get so much more from your team by being vulnerable than faking and looking insecure.
And I think, if you look at your, like when I talk about my team, it would be, high school juniors and seniors, but for, in a managerial team, you're looking at, qualified professionals. But in either case, I think people can sniff that out right away. I learned a long time ago, you can't fool kids, right? So like if I was faking it, or if I wasn't sure, but like forged on in a way that was, people would pick up on that right away. So I think that,
yeah,
being authentic, and if you don't have a solution, or if you want, people are gonna sense that immediately. If you're either doing that, and that's gonna be a great, entree into having a real committed group, or if you're not doing it, they're gonna sense that right away too. And kind of like you alluded to with the boss you had earlier, that it's like, this isn't good. Not because it's not about getting credit. It's just about having a good, well-run operation, and that's what everybody hopefully wants. And getting to that point, it doesn't matter. I tell the team, it doesn't matter. I don't care who scores, as long as our team scores.
And everybody wants to feel like they're a meaningful part of it, right? Everybody, I think, inherently wants to feel like they're contributing and doing something to help. And by being heard and letting people speak their opinion, I mean, I think that's a big part of allowing people to feel like they're a part of the team.
For sure. And I think it's about empowering them, and I think, like, for example, when we would go in to like halftime, You know, a lot of times, you know, you talk about halftime adjustments and all these coaches get a lot of credit sometimes for all this great adjusting, but a lot of times if we're in a tight game or we're having a hard time, we'll go in. The first thing I'll do is I'll say to my offensive line, like, what do you guys want to run? What do you think will work? You know, kind of like put it on them, you know. And I've had some awesome stuff. I've
Yeah.
had some times where they'll look at me like, you know, and I'm like, oh, this isn't good. But I've also had all kinds of times when they'll have like it engages them right away. It's not like you missed this block, you didn't do that. It's like, hey guys,
Yeah.
how are we gonna do this? What do you want to do? And I think they appreciate it, and you get some great things you didn't think of out of it. And I think it kind of shows a level of respect, in my case, to your players, that you're asking their opinion
Yeah.
at halftime of a close game.
And, you know, going way back, we talked about culture. And I think that, you know, that's establishing the culture, and the players or the staff knowing that they're going to be asked. They're already pre-thinking, I know John's going to ask me. I want to, you know, my brain's already engaged during the game, because I know at halftime we're all going to participate in this.
For sure.
I know when I get to the meeting, you know, Ralph's going to ask me. So I want to have some ideas around what we're talking about, because I know I'm going to get my chance to contribute.
For sure. Absolutely.
So people are probably sick of looking at this slide. So we'll move on here. I think from Pat Lencioni is that people will buy in when they have the chance to weigh in. And I think we've hit this pretty good. Is there anything else you want to add to this?
I mean, not per se. I think that, again, the idea of empowering your people, and, you know, whether it's a team or a group, I think, you know, that's going to get you that buy-in and that commitment level. And I think that that's what we're all striving for, because I think that you can really see like buy-in, you know, as he mentions in the quote there, like that's something to me that you can really see when you have it. And I think that, you know, I know, you know, as a coach, you know, I talked about it, especially in places where I've been early on, but like, I think you can really, like, we've gone to games, right? Summer league games where, you know, I always wanted my guys there early, warmed up, we're organized, we're ready. You know, we play teams that are kind of rolling in half of the time. They're putting their cleats on when the game's supposed to start. And I'll like say, hey, like, no disrespect to these guys. After the game, I'll say, hey, but you could feel the difference, right, before the game. And I think, you know, not that it exactly kind of gets to that quote, but I think it creates buy-in when they can see tangibly that, hey, there's a difference here. If we're doing this, if we're super committed, and there's another group that you can clearly see is not, then that's going to pay dividends for us, you know, moving forward.
Yeah. And it's a great example of who do you want to be a part of? You want to be a part of this culture,
right,
or that, right? And I think that's where we'll get into accountability next time, but where people really start to be accountable to each other is when they value what has been built so much that they want to protect it.
Yep.
All right, so we're going to switch gears just a little bit, but staying on commitment. Let's talk about commitment around meetings and decisions in general, and how decisions are made. And we really, I mean, one of the hallmark practices of effective meetings is being able to end a meeting with clarity. And, you know, meetings get kind of a bad rap, right? But crappy meetings get a bad rap. Good meetings where people are actually engaged and they want to go to them are highly effective. And we talk about it being a competitive advantage, because not everybody can do it. So some of the practices that we talk about is we talk about understanding, does everybody understand? So I'm talking about in the business world now, and John's going to talk about the sports world, but I'll talk about the executive leadership team now. So when we end a meeting and we're working through initiative, does everybody understand where we are in the work process? Are we in the brainstorming phase, or are we in the let's get it done and check off the items at the very end phase? And let's be clear about where those two things are in that spectrum. And who's responsible for what, and by when are they responsible? What are the tangible next steps in order for us to move forward. And those may be research items, those may be things that we don't have enough information currently right now to make a decision. Somebody's got to go get it. So when we come back, we can make a decision. That would be a next step. What information do we want to cascade to the team? We've been talking a lot about commitment. And a big part of that is, okay, what is it that we want to share with the team so the team is in the know and we could get their input as we're planning, right? And that's a part of understanding where we are in the work process. With the early part of the work process, there's time to get buy-in. So identifying that and being able to get the information down, because there may be some great ideas that come out of that cascading information, and people just want to feel a part of it. That's the big part of what we're talking about with commitment. And is everybody 100% clear on what we're doing? And that looks like when we wrap up a meeting and we're recapping, we're going through these things, okay, and then does everybody understand before we break the meeting, somebody says potentially, you know what, I'm still not sure about this item and how we're going to do that. And at that point, the leader has a choice, right? They can groan and be like, oh my God, I can't believe we're still doing this. And we've been going at this how long? And this meeting's going, or they can thank the person for bringing that up because they weren't clear. And we made this commitment that we're not going to leave this meeting until everybody's clear. So the leader really setting the stage for being able to reinforce this clarity so we can commit. So when we go out this room together, there is no cracks in our armor as an executive team as to what we're doing, and there's no half-stepping around the commitment for the rest of the organization to see. So that's the work side. I know there's 100 examples, great examples on the sports side.
Well, I first of all think that, a lot of this, one of the things, I think I've mentioned in a previous episode possibly is that one of the real foundational pieces I have with our team is we got to be great at the things that we can control. And so part of this, with meetings or with practices or team meetings is being organized. And being organized is really a lot of the things you mentioned. We're not winging it here. We have a plan. The plan is going to be clearly spoken to, and so there's no, like you said, I think the real problem in a lot of things with teams and organizations is when there's gray area about what's expected, what's next. And I think, this is a great, reminder that when you break the huddle, you break the meeting, that everybody's on the same page. And so, I mean, for me, I kind of chuckled when I saw this because whenever I'm addressing my team at the end of practice, and I guess as an aside, I would say I'm a big believer in the less is more when it comes to messaging, kind of have a message and, but then when the work's done, the work's done. So whenever we break practice, really, literally the last thing I say is, what's next? We win a game on a Friday night, bring up the team in the end zone. Everybody's happy. Great job, blah, blah, blah. Hey, weights tomorrow at 8:30. Don't be late. Boom. There's never when was weights again? Or, hey, end of practice, my linemen get the bags, quarterbacks get the footballs, receivers get the cones, practice tomorrow at 3:00. Boom. There's a clear thing and clear plan of attack for that. And I think that's, a big thing. And but also, being kind of consistent about how you present how you reinforce what's next, whether it's, maybe a recap email, if that's how you operate in the business, in your world or whatever, but having a thing where there's no doubt about what's next. And I think that'll make you much more efficient. And again, people will be able to dive into whatever that next task is, knowing full well what it is.
Yeah. And John, you were talking about before we got started, you were talking about really exemplifying this in yourself, right? As the leader,
yeah,
really setting that up for your people and really, setting the stage for them and modeling.
Absolutely. And I think with commitment for sure, and I know we've used the term lead by example, and you have to, really set the example. But I think, that is never more true than with commitment. Like your team, your group, managerial group, your employees have to see that you are in the trenches and are as committed, if not more committed, than anybody in the room. I know I mentioned I went to Silverton in 2010, and when I got there, it was a bit of a rebuild kind of thing, but great kids and great community and the whole bit. But they weren't used to having like weightlifting in the summer. And again, so I'd have two weightlifting. A lot of kids work. I'd have one in the morning, one in the evening. They had to come to one. But for a lot of coaches do something similar. But a lot of times, what coaches will do is, one coach will take it 1 week, one coach will take it the next week, and that's a very fine way to do it. But I went to all the weightlifting sessions probably the first 5 years I was there. I went in the morning, went in the evening, because I knew that. So the kids knew very quickly if they didn't go, I was going to be there, and I was going to know they weren't there. You know what I mean? I wasn't asking them to be at weights the next 2 weeks, and then I went to Hawaii. I was there. They knew I was there. So I think, maybe that's extreme, but I feel like if they know you're as committed, then it's a powerful pull for the rest of the group, because they don't want to be the one not as committed when their boss or their head coach or whatever else is.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, it let everybody know that was an important thing for you as a teammate. Part of your commitment, and I'm committing to,
right,
is to do this. Yeah, so that's awesome, John. So we talked about earlier about the team you're on versus the team you lead, and I thought that it was really worth revisiting that in this section, because I think this is really where the rubber meets the road. And it can be so subtle in work situations. If the team you're on, using my example of the executive leadership team, so that's the team you're on, right? So you've now made this decision. You've come up with this as a group. You've made this commitment to, here's what we're going to do. Now I got to go work with my team. Now this is really where this gets put into practice, because my attitude and how I portray this to my people is really going to dictate my level of commitment. It's really going to show my level of commitment. So exactly what you were just talking about. If I'm enthusiastic and I'm bought in and I'm supportive of the group, and we all talked about this, and we've thought about everything we can. We can't always think about everything, and we'll make adjustments if we need to. But no, we are all in this together. Or it's kind of like, I'm not sure if this is going to work. We'll do the best I can. Or, I don't think Stacy really knew, but you know what I mean? We can set this up either in two ways. So really, this is where commitment is really on display. So you said it so nicely, that being able to show people, and if the whole exec team is doing the exact same thing, then you've got a cohesive leadership team, and you got something special.
And I think, that, comes back to leading by example. And I think that people see that, and I've had a lot of examples over the years where people, I didn't even think they were noticing. And there's things that you do that they notice. And I think that's something that, as a leader, really, really doing that, I think, is gonna give you such an advantage. And I think that it can really make a difference. And I think that part of that, kind of looking to the other side of the slide there, is this idea of sacrifice. One of the things that I've really, I love all sports. In fact, I'm helping an assistant track and field coach right now. I haven't done that much. I'm enjoying that. But one of the things I really have appreciated about football all these years is I really believe it's really probably one of the most unselfish sports out there. Your team has to be unselfish. I mean, even, some of the guys aren't even going to touch the ball. If you're an offensive lineman, you're going into a season knowing you're never going to touch the ball if all goes well. So I think, having a big part of commitment is people's willingness to be unselfish. And I know the slide, notes sacrifice. And I think that's, if you do these other things, right? I mean, people will get to the point where they're okay with, I don't need the glory. I just want the team to be successful, because if we're successful as a group, then I know that I'm I've done my part, and I think that's that unselfishness, the sacrifice, really is the ultimate level of commitment when people are willing to do these things and knowing that they're probably not going to get the glory for it. But I think this is also where, as a leader, even if it's behind closed doors, or even if it's a handwritten note to somebody, or where you say, "Hey, I saw what you did," and that was amazing. Ironically, like last night, I'm in Beaverton, Oregon, and our team had a track meet, and I've learned quickly track meets can go kind of long, which is a great thing. But we were wrapping up. We had a home meet last night, and we were wrapping up, and it was starting to rain, and I, as we were going out, I noticed in the bleachers there was three of our athletes who really, honestly, aren't. They're not winning anything. They're just, and they all had a garbage bag, and they were cleaning up the bleachers. And I was like, wow. And I talked to the head coach. Did someone tell them to do that? And they're like, no, they didn't. So today at our meeting, they were recognized. We kind of, we won we beat the league champs last night, but we every time we select a MAV of them, or the Mavericks, the MAV of the meet. And rather than, our mile relay team won the meet on the last race. But to us, it was like the MAV of the meet is those three kids. Because you know what? We brought them up in front of the group and say, you know what? They're up there cleaning the bleachers because they knew that was important.
Yeah.
And so I think with this unselfishness and sacrifice, that shows to me a huge level of commitment. They could have been gone hours before. Certainly, they saw to the end to do something that no one else saw, but that ultimately was a big deal. So anyway, sorry for the wounded there, but that just happened last night. It was right on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah, no, great story, John. And I think, in work, we talk about sacrifice being, we started off talking about the scoreboard, right? And does your work team know what that scoreboard number is? And that's where sacrifice comes in. If I'm, as a department head, if I'm sacrificing head count or budget because of the bigger picture, then that's also showing my commitment to the team, because I am willing to make some sacrifice. And that can be in time, right? We got a big project. I've got to sacrifice maybe a weekend or some nights in order to get something done. I need to help out my teammates, right? So there's a lot of ways that commitment, sacrifice go together, that I'm willing to do that, because that's really sort of the commitment in action, is when I have to personally sacrifice something for the good of the team, right? Everything else is, it's great, but it's not as hard as sacrifice.
True.
Yeah. All right. Well, great session. So we always want to wrap up with some couple takeaways for people. So mine are, the real commitment is impossible without trust and good conflict. You're just not going to get real commitment. You may get a lot of head nodding, but it's not real in the heart commitment. And then ending meetings with clarity is vital, and confusion kills. So end your meetings, make sure everybody knows what's going on, what the next steps are, who's responsible for what, and what we're going to do in the next meeting in order to keep this moving forward.
Those are great, Ralph. And I would just, a couple notes I had there at the end. One of them is, make commitment observable. And what I mean by that is, if you build a committed group, it's tangible. You can see it. And I think that, it's one of those things, it when you see it. And I know that a couple of years ago, I had heart surgery that required me to miss the last part of 6 weeks of school. And I had a long-term sub for my classes. And one of the classes was our football weights class. And this guy that took over for me was a long time kind of Hall of Fame football coach. I didn't know him very well, but he was operating our weights class. And when I came back to visit the players there toward the end of the year, he pulled me aside and he was like, wow, like these kids are all over it. Like I opened the door and they set up the room, they're on time. And so I think if you get to a point where your group's committed, I think it's a beautiful thing. And it's something that can be seen very clearly to each other, but also to even an outside observer. And the last thing, to just kind of finish with is this can really give you a competitive advantage. It certainly can as a football team, or where if your group's more committed than the other, and they're more prepared and they're more focused, and again, this commitment is present, that can really help a team win that maybe isn't the most talented, but certainly that this can become a huge difference maker in terms of wins and losses, and that at least that scoreboard we're talking about. I feel very fortunate to I've coached a lot of teams that won quite a few games where we didn't have as many all league players as the other team. We didn't maybe have the superstars, but I was very grateful for the level of commitment of the players, because that can really be a competitive advantage.
Yeah, it takes us right back to smart versus healthy, right? The super talented team versus the team that's really committed to each other and is really sort of in it for the right reasons, is that smart team, and usually wins, not always, but usually wins, and in work and life and organizations as well. So, and I do love the observable. I thought that was such a great point that you made, that it is observable. And what I love about that too is that it allows other people to opt in or opt out, right? Because they can see that I want to be a part of that. That's me. That's awesome. Or, ooh, that's not for me. And then that's great, because you don't want those people anyways, right? So I think that's such a great, I love that point that you made. So our next session is on accountability. So we're working our way up. We're almost at the top of the pyramid. We're going to have to invert the pyramid and start over or something, John, so we can keep this going. But we're going to talk about authoritative accountability versus peer-based accountability, and very, very important distinction. And then measurable accountability versus behavioral. And I don't want to go into it because I don't want to spoil the next session. And then public versus private. And that's a little bit, it'll be a good discussion to have. So that's what we've got up for our next session. So appreciate you joining us, John. I appreciate you doing this. It's just, we text each other after how much fun we've had doing this. So it is a ton of fun. So thanks.
No, thank you. And like I said, I've had a great time doing this. And again, just I think I say at the end every time, and really my goal is, at this point, just to be a resource. And if some of these things resonate, and, I'd be thrilled, because I think, between the two of us in our different realms, we've been fortunate to see a lot of, good things happen when things are done the right way. And so if this can be part of your process of growing as a leader and a successful team, then that's great, because it sure is fun.
Well, I guess I should plug some of our other stuff too, right? Because John, you have your Substack newsletter that's subscription based, but there's a big part of it that you can see for free, but it's an awesome newsletter, well worth the money. So check that out. You can find it at Substack. So we've got that. John and I are working on a keynote related to this material. So our goal is to put it out in the universe, that we want to be able to go out to organizations and help people do this, and put this into a 90-minute keynote where we can go out and help organizations and bring these two aspects together. So we're working on that. So quite a few things we've got in the hopper between us, and enjoy working together. So take a look on social media, connect with us on LinkedIn. We're both on LinkedIn, and we can see if we can help you with anything. So, all right, John, we'll wrap it up. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.